opening up the questions. I told you I was going to ask you to answer. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I just recently moved to the Twin Cities, and as somebody who's new here, I would love to hear some of you speak about like how your art and your social activism reflects specifically the Twin Cities and being in Minnesota. It sounds like a lot of you've traveled, and yeah, it just feels really different here, and I'm trying to understand that.
Actually, a friend and co-activist who moved away from here recently put it this way. Asian Americans are racialized very differently in the Midwest, I think, due to a lot of different factors. You know, one, when people see us, there's a different visceral reaction. And my art definitely reflects that. And I think one of the strengths that we have is that, you know, like, okay, one of the things about mono-minority and kind of clumping us together is that, you know, those statistics get skewed because not everyone identifies as Asian and Asian American, right? Like people, okay, so before I went to college and I learned that there was this thing called Asian American, there were two types of people in the world. There were Vietnamese people and everybody else. You know what I mean? Like I didn't know I had anything in common with a Hmong person or an Indian person or a Cambodian person, even though we were kind of from that same area, right? But I think one of the things that's powerful about the Twin Cities is that sometimes we get together and have these conversations, you know, because our populations can be a little bit smaller here. It seems like people seem to be more willing, and I could be wrong, but seem to be more willing, you know, for us to kind of sit and talk about differences and similarities.
You know what, I'll tell you this. When I moved here many years ago, someone told me people come to Minnesota to heal. I didn't know what it meant then. A woman of color told me that. So, you know, I thought about it. And it's interesting now because when I came here, I didn't know anyone. And now I have a huge community. And when people tell me, wow, Minnesota's so white, I'm like, where are you living? Because my world is not white. Actually, I have a huge community of folks of color. And what I have learned from the very rich native histories in this place is I've learned not to complain about the cold, because honestly, if it was good for my Dakota friends, I'm not so special, okay? I can deal with it. So I feel like I have come to see this land through the lens of my native friends. And I hold, you know, I'm here at their invitation, and my gratitude goes out to them. So that's what I think is special about the Twin Cities.
For me, like I had to move away to feel free, and then moving and feeling displaced. Also, like thinking about how my parents feel displaced because of the war in Vietnam and Secret War, and then how I'm also like feeling like displacements around like geography and migration, right? And moving because I'm queer, and then moving back because I sort of found a community, because in 2007, like Hmong LGBT people started surfacing, right? And then coming back and feeling like, oh yay, Hmong LGBT people. And then kind of like, oh wait, they're just Hmong gay men. And bisexual, lesbian, queer woman. And so it was a struggle finding like community, you know, coming back to now having like this freedom and independence to be able to move and travel around, right? And my art, I came out to the Hmong community publicly through a poem, actually. And just speaking and talking and showing up in spaces around like open mics and like community organizations who are supportive in ways, and just talking and sharing who I am and what I'm trying to do, and through that being able to connect and build community, or me having to create my own community versus if other communities don't want me, right?
I would just say, when the theater community here went to the Asian American Theater Convention in LA, what people here realize is that the theater community here, the Asian American theater community here, and I think that reflects the larger Asian American artistic community, is much more activist, much more politically committed than in certain other communities. And I think if you want to see just a flavor of what this community is about, for the Associated Writing Programs Conference a couple weeks ago, we had a spoken word reading where, and it's up on the web somewhere, you can find a link through the Loft. It's an incredible reading, and it really shows both the diversity of artists here, but also the sense of community. And you can feel it in that room, in that reading. And I think that there are just, I feel personally, and that we make more connections, not just across Asian American communities, but across other communities of color here. So another question.
I'm actually not going to stand. My name is Michelle, and my question has to do with kind of the discourse around the word progress, right, and betterment, and maybe perhaps being in my 20s and still very angsty, you know. I often am very confused by what it means to think about progress as obvious, you know, not linearly, right, but you know, wanting to feel comfortable in complexity, but also understanding, but what is progress? What does it mean to feel better, or to know that you're living in a place that's better, but still feeling very miserable, that there's a lot of injustice out there? And also talking about how you want to be critical without discrediting a lot of other people behind us that have done a lot of progress. So I was wondering if you guys can talk about the complexity of progress, understanding progress.
Well, I guess you said it, it's complicated, you know, like, because you, and I understand what you're saying, it can be very frustrating sometimes. It's like, are we making a difference? Can we be doing something better? Or can we be better? What else can we do to make a difference? And I think, I mean, okay, so first of all, self-care is important. And I really do mean that. And two, I think those of us who are concerned with social justice, we have to keep doing it, and we have to make mistakes, and we have to educate each other, and we have to take a break and watch a TV show. It's probably offensive and bad. And then, you know, we have to figure out, you know what I mean? Like, we have to figure out a way to do it, because we do things and we have no idea what the consequences are. You know, like when I showed up at the first, when I was 18, and I showed up at the first Miss Saigon protest in downtown, it was freezing, and I didn't quite know what to make of this word Asian American and all this stuff before. It wasn't in my plan that I would become active in the Asian American arts community and be here tonight, you know. But I am, and it happened. And I think that we all do what we can, and we don't know what the effect is going to be, but there's a way in which we have to keep working, because the only option is not working, and that's scary.
I just want to echo what Bao said. Self-care is so important. Taking a break is so important. And being okay, you know, if you messed up or failed, I also think that like activism and social justice should not be like this, oh, like it's a paid job, but it's like, it should be a part of ourselves. And that's where like self-care and taking a break, you know, comes in play. I also like do a lot of self-reflection, like critical reflection and thinking around my journey as an activist and, you know, community organizer. Like, what are some like points in my life where I have like evolved or like moved, you know, and I feel like that is progress for me as a person. And then also talking with other people who do who have, you know, the similar idea and thought around like looking at our own journeys, you know, like having people to talk and through that process, even though you're not ending certain injustice, but you are like having a place of belonging and that having a sense of care and support that you need to feel revived and refreshed to jump and to go at it again.
You know, I think it's good to always remember that the historic use of progress in this country, the word progress, and how it's different from progressive. So I think of, when I think progress, I think of many pieces that we have in the company's repertoire, which are about moving as fast as we can and as precise as we can, just to keep up with an idea of what is first world accuracy. You know, till we go move so fast, we poisoned everything around us. So I think there's that too. You know, I just want to put that out there. And when I think of our own, you know, when Linda talks about critical reflection, I think of the two pillars in our work, you know, intentionality and accountability. They always go together.
In terms of progress, what I would say is, you know, Bao and I have been here since the first Miss Saigon protest. So we've seen these 3 protests, and what I would say the last go-around is we were better organized. There were more people doing things, and there was a great sort of spirit of like, we need somebody to get the permit for the protest. I'll do the sound system. I'll put up the Tumblr page. I'll put up the web page. And the thing is that years ago we couldn't get our word out. We couldn't get the arguments out about why we felt there was things wrong with Miss Saigon. Now we can do a whole web page. We did a whole Tumblr site of Asian Americans all over the country saying Miss Saigon lies. And that changed the whole climate of how our protest was received. And 20 years ago, the reviews were all positive about Miss Saigon. And this time, the reviews were all negative. And one of the local reviewers said, you know, I knew people were angry and I thought it couldn't be this bad, but I went to see it and it really is this bad. And then he said, you know, if you want to find arguments for why this is a piece of trash, go to the website, don't buy Miss Saigon Coalition. And the thing is that 20 years ago, the Ordway said, we're still going to bring it back. This time, we didn't get a pledge from the institution, but the president said as long as she's here, she will never bring it back. And we were able to make connections with funders, also in the funding community, which we didn't do 20 years ago. So we were looking at how to leverage power. So all of those things are different. And I think the thing is that people of color have a voice now that 10, 15 years ago, we had to go through white editors and gatekeepers to get our voice out. We don't have to do that anymore.
And really briefly, along that same line, we discovered that the Asian American community, the activist Asian American community, had a longer institutional memory than the Ordway did, right? Because basically the Ordway kept trying to use the same tricks they always use, which is, this plays a part to create discussions, censorship, blah, blah, blah. And because those of us have been in the struggle for this long, we're like, oh, no. You know what I mean? And I think that's a part of progress, is building that institutional memory in our own community so that we're prepared. And that's, to me, that's progress.
Other questions? Sean?
Thank you. A lot of, both between like what you said, Ananya, and Bao, surrounding nationalism, essentialism, erasure, brings up these ideas about boundaries. And I wonder if y'all could speak to, in some way, the ways in which we think about solidarity and the foreclosure of solidarity surrounding how we think about histories, and particularly the boundaries of those histories, and how it is that we think about geographies of resistance. I think a lot of times we don't necessarily cite or the ways in which we interpret histories becomes problematic to how we think about possibility within solidarity. So just trying to tease out maybe some more surrounding what y'all are thinking about there.
Yeah, I think that for me in the communities that I've worked with, like Asian American community here, specifically Southeast Asian LGBT people, solidarity has been such, like a big word, and we, like a core group of us, have been thinking about how Hmong LGBT people have to like move away, to find this freedom, and then also how the larger like mainstream talking about LGBT, that a lot of like Southeast Asian Hmong LGBT people take a lot of like it's okay, like making it the narrative around it. It's okay that you need to come out and you'll be okay, but at the same time, it's like this. It's like okay, like I'm celebrating that LGBT's out there, but that at the same time not being able to recognize that it's a narrative that's not our narrative, and that in reality, like Hmong LGBT people are like moving away, and so what does it mean for us as core like LGBT social justice activist people? Like how do we bring to visibility this reality that counters like this larger mainstream, white Western idea around LGBT, right? And we also have talked about how do we build with other communities of color who are LGBT in our community, and I think that we're not able to walk forward yet because there's still a lot of unpacking to do for folks to even know that racism is real and exists in this way. And I think that the barriers that, for me, in my experience, I have to be in certain spaces to learn about this, learn about solidarity, what does that term even mean, what is ending like racism and like LGBT oppression around like religion and politics, right? And what is my like role to really build a space to focus and talk about these struggles that are tied to like Black folks and like Native and folks, and I think that's so hard because being this core group of Hmong LGBT people who are struggling ourselves, but we're starting to recognize and doing a lot of self-care and doing a lot of these other ways of taking care of ourselves that we want to be able to create space and run workshops and talk about building with other communities and how civil rights movements tied to our rights today, like the Voting Rights Act and et cetera. And so I think like that's where like my experience and folks have been at, and I think that is how do we as folks who have these knowledge create these spaces to give access to our old folks who are struggling at this as well.
I'll try to answer. There are a few thoughts in my head. So I think Ananya touched upon this too, is that we tend to think of race problems and race struggles as an American problem. And we don't sometimes see the connection between how we participate in imperialism, colonialism, how, we don't discuss how, our iPhones, are being made by exploited, Chinese people, and that's racist, right? What's happening to Palestinian people is, anti-indigenous, it's land dump, it's genocide. And I think that we need to really, first of all, listen when people tell us these things, but also kind of always challenge ourselves. And I think in terms of solidarity, in my opinion, I think we need to move away in the Asian American community from this idea of exceptionalist Asian American activist, which is basically, I'm the down Asian American activist. All y'all other Asian American activists are, anti-Black, you're classist, and all of this stuff. Not like me. I'm dope. I'm down with this stuff. No. No, like, okay, so first of all, you speak English, you're probably college educated, and have you ever worked with the bottom 50% of your community who don't speak English, who maybe class struggle, and also probably feel even more marginalized than you because nobody gives a shit about them? Their struggle never makes the papers. And so I think that instead of us wanting to be the one, I think the important solidarity work is when we figure out strategically how to work with other communities in solidarity within our own communities. And that's easier said than done, but I think it's essential.
Thank you, Sean, for that language. I really appreciate the foreclosure of solidarity. I think some of it is for all of us to learn that solidarity doesn't mean immediately being part of, and it's okay. You know, we just had the May Day parade, right? And Janara and other Black artists called for, you know, other Black folks to be part of the Black is Sacred movement. And I think that was great that we didn't, the question needs to be, how do we support that? How do we march, but in support of them, instead of being inside of it? I think this immediate desire to be inside is sometimes a problem. But I also think that we sometimes, the truth also is that when there is more than two people, power has a way of getting encrusted at the edges. And I really am worried about that, you know, because we are constantly always implicated. We are all always already implicated, right? And I think about, you know, a very simple thing, something that irks me every day because I grew up practicing yoga. Of course, I used to laugh because my parents would be doing this thing in the bedroom every morning, and I was like, my God, what is this thing? It's so old-fashioned. I want to do something else, you know, something American, which was cooler and sexier. I mean, you know, what credit did yoga have then? Till the Beatles discovered yoga, right? Remember they discovered it? We're still Columbusing, right? So, but then the truth is that it hurts much deeper when Janelle Monáe did her video. Because we want something else from her, right? And because she was another person of color, and I was like, yes, you are my sister. Wait, what? So that was really deep, you know, it hurt deeper. And I think that, I feel like it's the lack of wanting to reach across. You know, we have a lot of respect for each other, but we don't have enough respect to say, you know what, I really want to know, even if the question is offensive, can I take the balance of our friendship and ask for how we stand on this? I think those risks, I want to take those risks because I want to ask the question. So when 2027 comes, I know who I'm linking arms with at the forefront of the struggle. That's the geography that I'm looking towards.
And can I just really quickly add, like I didn't mean to sound as like we should only work in our own communities. I don't think that's true. But I do think that we need to be strategic about it. Like for instance, really quickly, there was a case of a Chinese American, I wrote about it, a Chinese American police officer who shot an unarmed Black man, right? And there was like a petition to the White House, like 120,000 people signed to kind of stick up for the Chinese American cop. And that's obviously problematic, right? That's obviously problematic. But I also think that we should be asking some hard questions, like, who organized this petition, and how did you get 120,000 Chinese Americans to sign on to something, right? Like, I'm being real, like what strategies did you use? Because for Asian American issues who suffer from police brutality, we can't get near that many signatures, right? So then the question becomes, who organized it? What language did they transmit the message to? What was the message? How are they effectively reaching so many people and convincing them? You know, it kind of goes beyond essentialism. It's a strategy. Because we want to know how to get in touch with those people, communicate with them, change their minds, hopefully. Right?
Okay, Bob told me last one went on too long, so I'm getting this done in an hour and a half. So, thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for your great questions. And can we have a round of hand for the panel? And please feel free to come up afterwards and engage people in conversations. I'm going to read my sort of response to Sean's question, which is a poem about Yuri Kochiyama. And Yuri Kochiyama was a Japanese American from my parents' generation. She was interned, and after the war she settled in Harlem. She became a leading activist in Harlem, both for causes dealing with the black community there, but also with Puerto Rican community, with senior citizens and other activist causes. She was also a friend of Malcolm X, and she was there in the Audubon Ballroom when Malcolm X was assassinated. And actually there's a picture in life, if you go back, and she is cradling Malcolm X's head as he lay dying. Now, one of the points I always make is when you look at Spike Lee's film, Malcolm X, Yuri Kochiyama is not there. And I sort of understand that from the filmmaker's viewpoint. It's like, how do you explain this Japanese American woman in the front row cradling the head of Malcolm X? People would go, this is surrealistic. Where did this come from? But it's erasing history. And what's nice is recently figures like Yuri Kochiyama and Grace Lee Boggs, who was part of the black community in Detroit, have become better known, and their works as activists have become better known. So this is it's called Song for an Asian American Radical, Yuri Kochiyama. I opened the door, and there she stands, hectoring me about Malcolm X. Says impatiently, there's no time for sumie or sake, exigencies of meter, rhyme. She's so tiny, I'm so unknowing. Diffractions enormous, all those years of fires in Philly, Detroit, Oakland, Harlem, Watts, and I would add Baltimore. Behind her the night stalks its stars beyond history. And I know if I shut the door, each time she vanishes farther, till nothing remains but silence and sleep. Reader, you may think in the end I'll let her in. Don't count on it. That's why she keeps knocking, night after night. Thank you all.